Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been out in the snow and shot pictures of an animal in the snow, and then you look at the picture and the snow looks gray and dull? Well, there's a reason for that. And the reason is your cameras are calibrated to 18% gray, or that perfect mid-tone. And so when it sees a scene with too much brightness in it, well, it may be a bright sky, but in this case, a lot of snow on the ground, it's going to underexpose the picture just by default. And so what you've got to do in that situation is be mindful that you've got to override what the camera tells you. Now, it doesn't matter if you're shooting in winter in Yellowstone like I was last week, in the last week of January, or last night we had a big winter storm come through my farm in North Texas, and it dumped a bunch of snow and ice on the landscape. Doesn't matter if you're here shooting in pictures of snow or in Yellowstone or Alaska shooting pictures of snow, your camera's always going to handle it the same. And so what you've got to do when your camera underexposes, you've got to be mindful enough to be able to overexpose that image. Now, you can do that in manual just by increasing the shutter or decreasing the shutter speed a little bit. And so if you're shooting 1/250th of a second, if that's what the camera recommends, in snow you actually should be shooting about 1/125th of a second or 1/160th of a second, somewhere in between. So the point is you're overexposing the picture according to what the camera's telling you. If you're like me, or if you shoot in shutter priority mode, or if you're like me and shoot in aperture priority mode, you can use that handy dial called exposure compensation. And what exposure compensation does is it takes that base exposure and you can add a little bit more exposure into it. So what I do in the case of snow, I know I've got to overexpose a little bit, but the easy way to think about it's like this. If you look at the picture on the back of your camera, it looks too dark, you've got to add light or plus exposure compensation. So that's what I do. Whenever I take a picture in the snow, I'll dial in on the plus side on exposure compensation. Works the same way on shutter priority, but I dial in that plus on exposure compensation, and the camera's telling me, hey, look, this is wrong. You're not getting this exposure right. But I know by experience that if I overexpose in the snow is going to look white and the animal's going to be properly exposed. Now, you may be thinking, how much do I overexpose? Well, in my experience, no more than about a stop. If you're in bright sunlight and then everything's really snowy, about a stop exposure compensation is usually enough. Today it's overcast and it's kind of gray and dark out here anyway, so about 1/3 to 2/3 of a stop is enough. So what I do is I actually just look at the back of my camera, and once I take the picture and look at the back of my camera, if it looks too dark, I add light in. The great thing about mirrorless cameras is what you see is what you get, so that's a good way to calibrate it as well. But with post-processing, as long as you get a little bit close, you can fix it otherwise. But again, your camera's going to tell you you're not getting this right, but if you've shot in the snow enough and you know you've always got to overexpose a little bit, then you can tell the camera, hey, I got this handled, don't worry about me.